Well, the topic of taxation is very important. It's one of the most important sources of resources for the SDG. We have heard a lot about private sector mobilization. Can you hear me? So, but there are many SDGs that require public resources. So, the INFF methodology really is quite important and quite useful because it allows a very organic way of thinking about mobilization of resources, right? We think about what is needed, how much we need, how we are going to get this money, from what sources. So the same is true for taxation, right? Taxation requires some spending ideas, things that we need to finance. So taxes, we want to figure out, okay, how much we need to collect, how much is possible, and how we are going to go about it. Now, when it comes to taxation, there are basically three issues I want to mention briefly in relationship to the SDGs. The first one is the amount of taxation. So it is very clear that we have a large financing gap. We have seen in the presentation by the IMF that there is a big gap. The gap got worse because of the COVID, the pandemic, recent events, inflation, increases in interest rates. But the reality is that the gap was already very large before these events. And we have an enormous challenge to finance the SDGs. But when it comes to taxation, it's not just the amount, how much we need to collect, but how we are going to collect, what we are going to tax and what we are not going to tax. So there is a possibility to use the tax system to contribute to the objectives of the SDGs. So that is another dimension that is quite complex. We get into the dimension of tax policy, but it's an important one. And the third element is how we tax. So it's not just the policy, the tax policy, but also the tax administration issues. And there is important developments. The role of digitalization to make taxation more effective is one of the issues that are being discussed in many countries, and it's also something that can contribute more tax resources. In addition to these three issues, what is the amount we want to tax, how we are going to tax, what we are going to tax, what we are not going to tax, and how we are going to do it effectively, improving the administration, there are also some more philosophical issues related to tax compliance. So the question is why people want to pay taxes or don't want to pay taxes, right? And there is a long literature on this, economic literature. And one of the ideas recent times, it's not that recent, but it's been a popular area, is that people are more willing to pay taxes when they feel that the resources that they are contributed are going to be used for something that they enjoy and they like. So having said that, perhaps the SDG agenda is something that could be very popular. People would like to pay taxes because the SDGs is something that most people will benefit in one way or another. So it could be interesting to explore this idea as well, whether the implementation of the SDGs can lead to a new tax pact or fiscal pact that can improve compliance and make the collection of tax resources easier. Just a philosophical idea for consideration. Okay, we have with us a very diverse panel with quite degree of expertise and information. So I hope that some of these questions will be answered during this discussion. So let me introduce the speakers. We are going to have first a short presentation by our colleague from UNDP, Sudarshan, the regional tax specialist. Then we are going to have Mr. Elson Martinho da Costa, the National Director of Management and Effectiveness and Mobilization of External Assistance of the Ministry of Finance of Timor-Leste. We have then online, we had Mr. Odon Chimek Sendenbal, the head of Transfer Pricing Division, the Tax Audit and Methodology Department of the General Department of Taxation of Mongolia. He's going to talk to us from Ulaanbaatar. And finally, we have Mr. Kumarasiri, the Director General of the Department of National Planning at the Ministry of Finance of Sri Lanka. So, without further ado, let me start. Let me start with the first round of questions. Let me start by inviting Sudarshan to provide his presentation. Go ahead, Sudarshan, please.
Sure. Okay. Good morning, all. Thank you, Alberto. In fact, what my presentation will largely is kind of piggyback on what context Alberto said, and also the previous session laid out, the relationship between tax and the Sustainable Development Goals, which will, probably set the foundation for the other panelists to share their country experiences in terms of aligning their tax goals with the SDGs. To begin with, I believe in one of the panels yesterday, it was Elvin from PBSP who mentioned the fact that, the hierarchy of, what significance the public finance, especially if tax, comes at the bottom hierarchy, doesn't get the significance, attention it needs to. In fact, if I may borrow his term, he said it's not sexy to feature in the top or in terms of priority aspect. So what the endeavor or the objective is, not to make it sexy, at least, kind of, bring the spotlight on taxation, its significance, and especially at these challenging times where we have witnessed a historic decline in tax trend in terms of tax to GDP or even revenues, as a matter of fact. Having said that, this is an opportunity time, as they always say, adversity doesn't block the path to success, but actually enables us a building block or creates the bridge that is required to relook at these public finances, especially taxation. And countries have also started increasingly utilize the INFF in order to strengthen their tax institutions, align the tax and SDGs, and more importantly, enhancing tax collection, which is very imperative. So let me begin with a very optimistic note. Despite the uncertainty glooming around in terms of the numbers, the optimistic note, comes from a recent study published by the OECD and the revenue statistics in this Asia-Pacific region. What the study, refers to is there is a potential to increase tax revenues by an average of 3.6% of GDP, which is very significant, especially at these times. Now, this is largely based on the tax capacity. So what does that mean is, the assessment of each country's capacity to generate revenues, considering its structural characterizations such as GDP per capita, the size of the agricultural sector, trade openness, etc. So therefore, this really shows that there is huge amount of appetite and significant possibilities to increase an average of 3.6%, as I mentioned, which is a significant amount of revenue collection at these tough times. Now, having said that, getting into the topic in terms of the tax trends or the reforms, if you look at the wave, what I've depicted, this was actually one which I did pre-pandemic. The idea at that point in time was, there were a lot of measures happening in terms of tax evasion, transparency, and eventually in 2024, getting into a sustainable development motive, beyond, getting the tax evasion part, which was the work that was happening, and countries have also been strengthening through various reforms. Now, the silver lining from the pandemic is it has exacerbated the need for sustainable development. So therefore, this particular slide is still relevant and all the more relevant and imperative, because this is what we're going to talk about in terms of how fiscal contract can be established and how it is significant from a sustainable perspective. Specifically on the reforms, there are 3 areas which I would like to dwell upon. There are quite a lot of activities happening, but these 3 have a connect to the SDG goals as well as from a domestic revenue mobilization perspective as well. Now, all these eventually surround around increasing solidarity taxes, energy taxes, growth patterns, etc. But one notable trend, of course, I'm for a moment not getting into the global macroeconomic, but I largely look on the 3 major trends from a tax policy standpoint that will help in terms of augmenting domestic revenue. One is the establishment of a global minimum tax as a revenue mobilization feature. Now, incidentally, it is not designed for a revenue raising mechanism, but its purpose is largely to ensure that corporates or the multinational enterprise pay a minimum tax of 15% in order to prevent their income to a low tax jurisdiction. Now, the objective is to largely ensure that there is a level playing field and kind of discourage a harmful tax competition among countries. Now, it is also estimated that Pillar 2, which is the global minimum tax, would fetch a revenue of around USD 200 billion for developing economies, which is significant. And it will benefit more than the higher income jurisdictions for all these while due to transfer pricing and certain tax shifting mechanisms. Now, amidst the revenue raising mechanism, to me, what I look from the global minimum tax is it's crucial to foster tax competition in a very productive manner, which unfortunately all these whiles have been one-sided in terms of tax competitions. And now the global minimum tax to a larger extent will thwart that and try to ensure that we have a fair competition which will eliminate unnecessary tax incentives which are aimed at foreign investments. Largely countries in a euphoria to garner foreign investments, there are a lot of tax incentives which can be unproductive, bad ones. So that can be eliminated. Now, having said that, in terms of investments, I think this segues to the next important reform that I would like to touch upon, which is harmonizing tax, trade, and investment. And this is another significant area in terms of talks that's happening, aligning from the SDG perspective, trade and SDGs or investment and SDGs, while we have a responsible investment coming in. Now, even from a country standpoint, different departments look at various parts. So unfortunately, tax or trade, investment work in a silo manner, not in a cohesive, in a unified manner. So now what happens eventually has happened all these while is led to investment arbitrations against developing economies, leading to huge compensation for multinationals, and also at the same time, create sort of a disputes with the World Trade Body, and more importantly, as I already alluded to, in terms of giving certain unproductive and bad tax incentives, so to speak. So the eventually, have a harmonized tax state investment will ensure that we have responsible foreign investment while providing, substance-based tax exemptions, which will augment well in terms of from a labor or productivity standpoint. Now, finally, I will conclude with a very significant point, which also touched upon a comment made by the colleague from Pakistan in terms of enhancing the fiscal contract. And tax, I believe, plays a very significant role in fostering the fiscal contract. And now countries are looking at building this called the fiscal citizenship. So now in order to foster this fiscal citizenship is to reinforce the social contract between the government and the citizens. As we all know, the fundamental aspect of contract is, taxpayers pay their fair share of taxes and government use those resources to give back for welfare activities. Now for this to happen, for the monetary resources for the government to happen, there has to be a strong social contract between the citizen and the government, for which, again, in order to foster it, you need to strengthen the tax institutions. Now, to strengthen the tax institutions, there are various mechanisms, for example, improving the capacity, tackling illicit financial flows, improve transparency, and more importantly, the trust among the stakeholders. Now, all these boils down because I believe taxation is a core element to uphold and establish the social contract, and the positive spillover it can also leave behind in terms of other governance areas such as the rule of law, justice, parliamentary oversight, etc. So, therefore, I believe that is a very significant reform. Well, I'll conclude, since I mentioned Elvin at the beginning in terms of tax not being sexy, now what has happened is thanks to pandemic and thanks to all the multidimensional crises that we've gone through, taxation has got back the spotlight or is in the forefront of the agenda. And I believe it is essential that we have these kind of meaningful dialogues about taxation to foster sustainable development, such as what we're going to do now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sudarshan. A very, very good presentation and very brief but substantive. I would like now to turn to Timor-Leste. The question is about tax policy, can support the attainment of some SDGs, and one example is SDG 3 on health. So, how Timor-Leste has recently introduced a tax on tobacco products. Can you please describe how this tax works and what was the motivation to its introduction?
First of all, thank you, Alberto. So I'm very pleasure to be here. This is just sharing the experience, what has been done from Timor-Leste side, because this is a very crucial and very good momentum from Timor-Leste in order to gaining the opportunity, because we all know that Timor-Leste is heavily rely on petroleum funds in order to make sure that sustainable for financing and assure the fiscal space to guarantee that the SDG theme about the no one left behind. So that, but let me very briefly to introduce the Timor-Leste that according to our census that the size of population is 1.34 millions. That's now the governments really focus on to make priority for health and education, because this is the main important sector that can be contribute or elevate the human development. And according to the Human Development Index, that Timor-Leste is in this time is compared with the 3 years backward, is not increased, but it's decrease in terms of scoring for 61 to decrease to 0.61 decrease to 0.45. So it means that because this is the based on the populations, the growth of the population that's increased 1.2%. So for that, we are struggling to increase the our, as I mentioned, that our Human Development Index, and very specifically on the in terms of the health condition and context of Timor-Leste, that based on the WHO findings, that almost 700 people, as young people, was passed away or dead every year. So it means that really huge number of the mortality rates of young people. So that's why, as we all know that the average size of the young people is smokers. So this is can really contribute to the impact of the communicable diseases and some non-communicable diseases. Thus, go back to the fiscal space that Timor-Leste is facing, and in terms of the very lowest public expenditure for the health sectors, that it's only around 25% of the public expenditure that for health sectors is not really cover the universal health coverage. So that's why, as I mentioned, that in this time, take the advantage of the others per learning from the colleagues from like Indonesia and Philippines that also trying to increase the tax excise tax. So that's why this is the government take advantage for through this INFF pro health taxation. So very recently we, very recently we through the parliaments already enacted this pro health taxation, and then already implement start from January this year. So that especially for tobacco and sugar and sweetened beverage. So especially for the tobacco, to increase from 19 per kg to $25 per kg. So this means that this can be really contribute, not really significant, but it's contribute to increase the tax collection revenue for 4 million per year. So I think this is also to reduce the smoking. I mean, the smokers, the number of smokers for these times. Additionally, to recognizing this, promote the behavior of the smokers. That's why take this advantage. The government also promote or introduce the sweetened beverage tax for $3 per kilogram of the sugary drinks. And for that, I think the government of Timor-Leste discourage the customer to engaging the healthy behaviors for these times, and also based on calculation that to increase this, the tax for tobacco, not only this time, but the government also have a planning to increase more 50% the coming years. This is calculated that can be contributes or collections almost doubled from 12 million per year. Still very far from the expectations, but this is opportunity that the government of Timor-Leste would like to introduce this tax. I think more or less this is just to share in the experience, but because this is also once through the INFF, we would like to, in terms of the domestic resource mobilizations, to increase the fiscal or assure the fiscal sustainability. More or less, thank you, but we can discuss.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Da Costa. Now, this is a very, very important initiative because you have an impact on increasing the tax collection, which is an important goal. But most importantly, you are contributing directly to the health SDG. And I think that probably the benefits are not just the collection of taxes, but the savings on health costs by having less people smoking and having cancer, some things like that. We are going to turn now to the second panelist, who is actually speaking from Mongolia. Ms. Tsendembal, are you online now? Okay, yes, we can see you. Okay, let me, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Perfectly, yes, very good. So Mongolia is the second largest landlocked country in the world and is endowed with significant natural resources. As such, mining is one of the main economic sectors in Mongolia. The sector has attracted significant foreign investments and is dominated by multinational enterprises. While this has boosted economic growth in Mongolia, tax avoidance by multinationals through the transfer pricing mechanism can result on reduced tax revenues. Can you share what Mongolia has done to address this problem?
За та бүхэнд өглөөний мэнд хүргэе. Баярлалаа. За би миний слайда би шеэрлж байна.
Could you hear me? If you can
Yes,
share,
yes.
please.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Apologies.
За би юугаар шеэрлж чадахгүй надад тэрний шеэрлэх байгаа юм байна.
There will be simultaneous interpretation. We are waiting for the interpreter. Please bear with us for a few minutes.
За баярлалаа. За юуны өмнө тулганд хэлэх боломж ажиллагаа хуваалцах боломж олгосон та бүхэнд баярлалаа. За манай улсын хувьд бол одоо Монгол улс бол ашиг нөхцөлийн маш их нөөцтэй за эдийн засгийн энэ гараад ирсэн удаахан савлаас нэлээд хамааралтай байдаг. За энэ дээр бол удаахан салбарын төр асуудал нь хамгийн гол асуудал болж байна. За слайд. За хавханд би өнөөдөр бүрийн орлогод улуурхаан салбар хэрхэн нөлөөлж байгаа талаар үзүүлээ. Next slide, please. Next slide. За бүрийн манай улсын одоо
Sorry, Ms. Sednebal,
Yes?
we cannot hear the interpreter. If you don't mind, we are going to move to the next panelist until we solve the technical problem. We give you a few more minutes. So please wait another 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes, and we'll get back to you. Okay? So we can have your interpreter. Thank you so much. Apologies, colleagues, there was some technical problem. We are going to move now to our next panelist, Mr. Kumarasiri from Sri Lanka. Currently, Sri Lanka is undergoing a very severe economic crisis. The tax revenues presently contribute less than 10% of the GDP. But in the past, we're talking about maybe 30, 40 years, the tax to GDP ratio was about 21%. So what strategies or adjustments can be implemented to modify the tax framework in Sri Lanka in response to the current crisis? Over to you.
Yeah, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much giving this opportunity to present Sri Lanka context with you and share the experiences. And before go to your question directly, but I just want to just brief why it happened to Sri Lanka. And we had a East attack 2019, and it was affected badly in Sri Lanka, and tourism was reduced, arrival was less in 2019. When it picked up in early 20, but then COVID was affected globally, and also Sri Lanka affected very much because we are one of the income from the tourism. And due to these 2-year severe COVID challenges, our economy was turned down. And 2022, it was affected badly, this economic crisis. And you might heard, maybe you might seen, Forex issue we had, and no import oil, no import gas, and the crisis was started. People were unrest, public came to the road, and the entire country was affected. With that, this situation we want to come up, and government went to IMF and had a discussion and agreement. Fortunately, now country situation is getting better, and with IMF alignments, we started reforms in Sri Lanka. Tax is one of them, but lot of reforms we started, and IMF engagement from last year April, we had a lot of changes into the tax reforms, and started government changing a lot of activities in the tax reform. And we started fiscal consolidation, revenue enhancement, and expenditure rationalization. We have reduced a lot of unexpected expenditure, and drastically we reduce some expenditure, and lot of development activities also reduced, and only new projects we never started. Last year and this year only we are continuing some of the funding projects because of low income. Tax is one of them, and the last year we introduced new income tax. Previously, 2019, government has relieved some tax. Therefore, we lost around 600 billion to 800 billion rupees per year. That was badly affected, but we started early this year a lot of revenue actions. Therefore, we will get a lot of income to support SDG and other activities, and introduce new reforms, income tax, as well as value-added tax, and telecommunication levy, and betting and gaming levy is approved already by the parliament and already started implementation last year and early this year. Our the VAT base was 8% previously. It was increased to 15% last year, and lower the VAT registration threshold. Now we cover a lot, and remove some VAT exemption previously. We done it, and also reinstate mandatory income tax. And very recently, government introduced broadening the tax base. Above 18 years old person, citizen in Sri Lanka has to open tax file without considering the income or any other means. That is mandatory. From this year, we'll start tax file for everyone. That will support to capture some of the incomes coming years. And we have, you can see the presentation slide, increase our revenue by 69%, and also reduce the budget deficit 7.9 up to 7.9 from 9.8 2022. And also corporate tax reforms support us, increase the income from January 24% to 30% in March this year. And also you can look at the income from the personal income tax from 3 billion January to 11.9 billion in March. This will increase gradually. This was 4 times higher than within 3 months' time. And also we have a problem with our digitalization tax system. We started 2016, almost 8 years gone, but system was not functioned well. We have invested 5 billion rupees, more than that, but still we are unable to run the system. We call Ramesh, Revenue Administration Management Information System. Now we are relaunching it to capture most of the revenue income tax without human interferences. This system, if we implement, we could capture most of the income to the government. and also combating, as Sudarshana just mentioned, tax evasion and corruption in taxation. That is one of the important area to be looked at. Now government has concern and looking at how best we could manage this tax evasion and corruption in Sri Lanka. And also government is in the preparation of introducing property tax, transfer and gift tax, as well as the inherent tax from January 2025. Therefore, our tax base, revenue base will increase from 25, additional support. Now we are working with UNDP very closely. We had an agreement with UNDP in Sri Lanka early this year, 2-year partnership with the UNDP. With that, we are very closely working with UNDP in Sri Lanka. They are supporting us for the tax administration, as well as improving the capacity of the institutions where we required to get additional income, and also tax for SDGs is stepping stone for GSL to enhance domestic resources, mobilization and foster a strong connection between development, finance and revenue generation. That will support alongside with the IMF program. And my last slide, that also continue to work with the tax for SDGs initiative in Sri Lanka and build, as Sudarshana just mentioned, social contracts. That is very important. And also we need to aware the public people how to tax, how to pay tax, and also supporting institutions capacity and also trust in institutions, reducing corruption and all other unused practices, and also improve tax collection and digitalization of tax administration is very important, and also gender sensitization taxation and energy transition, and also environment taxation that also will support through these initiatives. And fair tax system also very much important to contribute Sri Lanka future development in relation to the SDG. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is a very, very interesting, really a broad range of reforms, and which are very difficult to implement in normal times. There's always difficult to implement tax reforms. So perhaps there's a good side to going through a terrible crisis. Okay, Sri Lanka is going out. Really congratulations. This is quite interesting program you're implementing. We are going to try one more time with Mongolia. Hopefully the problem is resolved. Ms. Tsedenbal, can you hear us? I hope the interpreter can be audible. Can we try?
This is interpreter. Can you hear me?
Oh, perfectly. Yes. Please go ahead. Yes. Do you want me to repeat the question? I think you already have the question, so please go ahead.
No need to repeat the question.
I can repeat. Yes.
No need to repeat.
Sorry.
No need.
Please go
Okay.
ahead.
First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to all the organizers. And could you show my slides? Could you start showing my slides? So once the slides are, I will start. Okay. So Mongolia is a country with the vast resources of mineral. And then we have the mining sector, which is playing the most important role in revenue collection of the country. Next slide. Related to our state budget, the role of mining can be illustrated by those diagrams here. So our revenue in these 4 years, starting from 2019, has been of increase. In 2019, for instance, it was 5.7 trillion tugrik, Mongolian tugrik. Then In 2022, you can see that the revenue increased to 9.3 trillion tugrek, so it was significant increase. Also, as you can see from the slide, the revenue collected from mining has been of increase in nominal sense. The tax collected from mineral has been of increase. In 2022, only from mining, we had 4 trillion tugrek collected. So as you can see, the role of mining is quite high in total tax revenue. Between 44 to 51% of collected taxes are from mining sector only. We have the table of the sources of revenue, where we have all the sectors where the mining is the prevailing one. Also, we have in our country mining companies. Besides the multinational companies, we have Mongolian companies who are involved in the implementation of some major big projects. Next slide. We have been cooperating with IGF since 2015. We became the member of IGF in 2015. Later, in 2017, we joined the OECD G20 Inclusive Framework on BEPS. In 2018, we became member of the Global Forum with the support and initiative of IGF. We got the project on technical assistance project on mine taxation since 2019. In 2020, in our tax authority, we started a reform process. That was the second big tax reform in our country. And then related to the transfer pricing, also related to the information and communication exchange, also for fighting against the tax avoidance, paying taxes. There have been a lot of new concepts elaborated and introduced into Mongolian laws. So under the tax reform, we focused on strengthening our laws legal framework. And then this program has been supported by OECD, IGF, UN, and other organizations. Many expert-level institutions were involved in our program and helped us to improve the legal framework. Also, connected to the mining sector tax issues and problems, in 2019, we requested our partners in helping to improve our capacity on identifying and eliminating the problems with mining taxes. For instance, we wanted to collect all the necessary taxes from the mining because there was a quite big area of avoiding paying taxes among our mining sector companies. In recent years, Mongolia has been cooperating with many international institutions who can bring to Mongolian reality some new concepts and some new methods and strategies. So for enforcing the new tax law, we do need some capacity building activities. And so international projects were helpful for strengthening our human resource capacity at tax administration. Next slide. Here you can see that together with the TIWB program, we have focused on the following important concepts. One is transfer pricing topic. So we established the transfer pricing division at our General Tax Authority, and that is to be the unit with some advanced capacity on making proper analysis in our country's situation of the transfer pricing risks. We had international consultants involved in our project who played significant role in organizing training and enhancing capacity of Mongolian tax stuff, especially in terms of having some exposure to what of the areas of concerns can be connected to transfer pricing methods used by the transnational companies. Our tax inspectors all were able to receive such training, and then we did auditing, transfer pricing auditing. And from the beginning of the process until the end, we were getting some proper assistance by our partner institutions and consultants. Also, we learned about how we could refer to the arbitration and other dispute resolution mechanisms, international mechanisms. Also, our consultants of the project were very helpful in having the better access to the communication exchange platforms and methods. Channels of communication, communication exchange. For transfer pricing auditing, it is very necessary to have such access to the other organizations, other databases information. So we were able also to purchase with the guidance, under the guidance of the experts, we were able to buy the access to international databases. And that was helpful for us to do the proper transfer pricing risk analysis. And so we improved our capacity on doing analysis on the tax and the other accounting documents. So we are now using some improved software. Also, we have some good meetings organized with the international organizations and foreign organizations who can be helpful to us for bringing to us some necessary information. Again, that work was supported by the experts who worked at the project. And so in terms of getting access to such documents, and also in terms of exchanging our information, we had a lot of progress under this project. Also, during the auditing process, although the auditing process happened during the COVID lockdown time, there were a lot of good results obtained. In 2020, we started our auditing process on the activities by transnational companies, and we did this work together with our international experts, and that helped us to identify $228 million taxes that were not paid, and we got it compensated, and we reduced the deficit by $1.5 billion. All that money has been paid through the budget. And then during the COVID time, that was very useful because Mongolian economy at that time was not in a good shape. Also, our consultants were helpful in making a lot of good work on capacity building for how the auditing and inspecting can happen to not only to big companies, but also to medium and small companies. And so we were able to get back $94.6 thousand taxes through that process. Also, the international best practices, especially connected to the mining taxes, some new concepts have been brought to us, and that was used in doing the auditing on the documents of three big transnational companies. So that was helpful for making. That was very helpful for making the process to be organized organized by using international best practices. So we're very grateful to our supporters with our project. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tsenenbal. Very interesting description. This is a very complex area of taxation, international taxation, and I think really interesting that Mongolia is really getting ahead in this area. We have a few follow-up questions. We try to go quickly because I'm aware that the time is finishing. So let me ask again Mr. Martinho da Costa about if you can, following up on the previous question, if you could please tell us what broad measures your country has in view to improve the enforcement of these health taxes that you mentioned.
Thank you. So even through this implementation of the tobacco measures, I think this is a very, very specific question on that, because this is under the tax authority and custom authority portfolio. But to asking this, to respond these questions, I enrich a few bullet points here to say that now in terms of the excise tax rate is very low. So it's only representing 90% retail price in 2018. And also trying to, I mean, the Ministry of Finance follow the best practices for excise tax, represent 70% for retail price few coming years. So this can be really contribute a significant amount for tax collection. And also in terms of the implementations that facing few challenges in terms of the failure of increase of tax in that price increases, and also tax price decline over time, because as I mentioned that there are also a few problems in terms of the tax structure itself. So the consideration is in order to levy it per kilograms, opposite, I mean the opposite, not the quantity, but in terms of the opposite for the weights. So to calculate the retail price, and also in terms of the means that this can be take advantage from the others, the other suppliers, or the traders can manipulate the price and to make the smoking lighter, and also to length for length of the cigarette itself. And in terms of the another way to that implementations and challenges, the governments, I mean, to sort of take away or strategize the administration process in terms of avoidance and tax evasions. So to can easily reduce the tax liability for supporting shortage of cigarette itself. And in reality, that's the traders can really manipulate the process in terms of the let's say tax stamps or fiscal marks of the packs on the cigarettes, so that they can I mean untaxed product can evasion. So in terms of free and also sell dirty cigarettes, free dirty cigarettes is not banned in that case. And also as the result of poor tobacco tax policy and possibly poor tax administrations, and also excise revenue is low in 2012. So it's only collect only 15.6 million tobacco taxes. So it's very less than what the expectation. But I think this, as I mentioned earlier, that this can be take momentum and learn from other countries. So can it be doubled collection until 15 to 18 million per year. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, this reminds that the implementing a policy is complicated. Thinking about a policy, starting announcing it, starting it, it's always not easy, because there's always a lot of issues, to propose a new policy. But the difficult part comes with the implementation, and it's always a work in progress where you have to improve, according to what results do you see, in the implementation. Thank you so much for that. Let me turn again to Mr. Kumarasiri. Following up on your discussion on Sri Lanka's tax framework, I understand that your country is considering building an integrated national financing framework, which will include a crisis-sensitive financing strategy. How can the INFF approach help in fostering a strong fiscal social contract in the country?
Yeah, thank you very much again. Sri Lanka is still not engaged with INFF so far, but we had little discussion with UNDP to start with. But we have done a lot of activities in green and blue financing of the economies. Sri Lanka is an island and also rich in biodiversity and also rich in natural resources. And Sri Lanka has 7 times larger sea around the country. That also will support us a lot of green or blue the financing in future. But so far, government of Sri Lanka has initiated a lot of activities. We had a lot of opportunity with the partner agencies, development partners to start. And we already developed the green taxonomy by the central bank. Of course, all the partners was engaged in the government as well as private sector. And also, Ministry of Finance developed the green bond and the blue bond framework already in line with the National Adaptation Program and also nationally determined contribution. And also, we are very closely working with the UNICEF, UNESCAP, UNDP, and GGGI very closely for the sustainable financing that already underway. And we have already started committee under the President's Secretariat with the advice of the President, the Green Financing Committee. We are continuously working with the government and private sector as well as other development partners. We have already initiated preparing a marine spatial plan. UNDP also helping us developing this plan that will support for us to get blue bonds very soon in Sri Lanka. And also we had loan discussion with all the development partners individually and also collectively. And we are trying to map up all the agencies who can help us during these initiatives, especially UN partner agencies as well as World Bank, ADB, and all other development partners, EU and USA. We are closely working with all the partners, and we really required support, expertise, and technical support to develop these initiatives. And we are expecting to support strengthening the forex issue in Sri Lanka. And also we are securing climate financing to blue bond economic initiatives by monetizing the natural capital assets. And also we have already initiated financing debt for nature and climate swaps. That also will support us. And sustainable financing of renewable energy infrastructure, that also will support us. Those initiatives already underway and started. And we are expecting INFF will support us this financing initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This is interesting because countries are in different, pathways towards INFF. I mean, the model implies starting, with all the plan and then implementing it, but many countries are already implementing components of the INFF, right? So it is always possible to, down the road, to bring an INFF to provide additional coherence. But this is a very, country-driven initiative. Countries take whatever is useful for them, and the process can be done in many different ways. So let me turn back to Mongolia for a follow-up question. So, Ms. Tenenbaum, following up on your discussion, on the you have mentioned, I understand, that there is a role for the tax inspections without borders in identifying potential tax avoidance mechanisms. What challenges do you foresee in collecting lost tax revenue as a result of such mechanism? Over to you.
Okay. Related to the implementation, enforcement of our tax law, we have been organizing some inspection activities that are scheduled. The transfer price related auditing process usually takes a lot of time. At the beginning of the auditing process, we can train quite many people, but it happens that the people would not stay longer with the tax office. They may go to private sector, so it means that the quality of our inspection work can be deteriorated during the course of the time. And so, especially connected to the auditing activities by our tax administration, we need to try to keep the high expertise of our staff. Many of our young people who already received a lot of training may decide to leave this job and to go to private sector or to other government agencies. There are several reasons why people are not stable enough. This is first reason is, of course, the remuneration at the civil service is not good enough, and also everywhere we have the inflation problem, the food and other item price increase. That would mean that many people would prefer to work to choose the work which is better paid. Also, our young inspectors who are educated abroad are attracted by higher salaries promised by private sector companies, international companies. And so because there is like 5 times the difference in the price of civil servants and the foreign company Mongolian staff. And then our tax inspectors, they are supposed to work in more difficult conditions than other civil servants. But unfortunately, there is no special benefits for tax staff. And that's why this is another reason why people are not retaining for a long time at the tax administration. And then losing those talented people is, of course, a big problem for our tax administration capacity. That's why we would like to continuously working on strengthening the capacity of our people and helping them to retain with the tax administration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you pointed out a really important problem in your particular area. Your staff has a very, very great expertise. This is a very complex problem, transfer pricing. And this staff have become very valuable to private companies, and they can migrate and get other jobs. So this is another important element of policy implementation when it comes to retaining talented staff that are the people who are going to be implementing policies. Okay, we have a few more minutes for questions. I'm not sure how we are doing with the timing, but please, about 5 minutes. Please raise your hand. I see one here. Chamindri, please. Somebody can give her a microphone over here. please indicate who you address your question.
Okay, so I'm Chamindri from Sri Lanka. I represent the Sustainable Development Council. It's not really a question, but I would like to compliment what the Sri Lankan colleague mentioned, and also just highlight the fact that we have also, Sri Lanka has also developed budget coding and tagging guidelines, SDG-based budget coding and tagging guidelines, and are looking at how to institutionalize this by integrating into the public financial management system. And in addition, Sri Lanka has also launched the SDG Investor Map and conducted sector deep dive analysis to create the enabling environment to drive private investments towards SDGs, so that all of these different initiatives fit into the different components of an INF. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see Mr. Ali Kamal.
Hi, this is Ali Kamal from Pakistan, Ministry of Planning. I just have one question or a query. Have you developed, and it's a very good policy that if the taxes are aligned with SDGs, then it's a two-pronged strategy that we have a byproduct, that's revenues, and then we have SDG achievement as well. So do we have a list of indicators or targets on SDGs whom we are taxing, and that will result in the two products? Thank you.
Sure. In fact, when I did a quick prelude in terms of the broad overarching themes, it largely works on a couple of initiatives which UNDP has developed. One is the TIWB initiative, which the Mongolian delegate in terms of alluded to. The other is the Tax for SDGs initiative. So what we have done in the Tax for SDG initiative is we have prepared a STF framework, which is Sustainable Development Goal Taxation Framework, and that's a niche tool, so to speak. The STF tool is kind of a self-assessment or an introspection by the tax administration. This is quite akin to the TADAT assessment, which IMF does, but the only difference is TADAT is more tax administration-based assessment. But what the STF tool does is a tax policy kind of an assessment. So that's the differentiating factor between IMF TADAT vis-a-vis to the STF framework. And yes, we have tried to match out, and we are expecting an official launch of the STF framework tool. We have also engaged with the cross-sectional communities from gender, climate, taken their inputs as well. So it's not a pure tax product, it's kind of a tax aligned to ensure that the SDG goals. So we are achieving, as you say, twin prong. One is domestic revenue, the other is use tax policy to influence economic behavior through the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudarshan. I think we have one more over here, please. Please identify yourself.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Rania. I'm the economist at UNDP Lao PDR. Thanks for the presentations, particularly the topic of tobacco taxation, which is very relevant to Laos. Laos has the lowest tobacco tax rate in ASEAN region. It's about 18% of the retail price. So this is something we've been working with WHO on at UNDP. And one of the challenges that Laos also has is also the tax exemptions that is being provided to the main tobacco company. So there's a 25-year investment license agreement which has a cap on excise tax rates. So Sudarshan, you mentioned a little bit, you touched on the tax incentives and how to link tax incentives to more responsible investment regimes. Tax exemptions is a core problem for the government of Laos, so could you elaborate a little bit on those types of reforms around tax incentives? Thank you.
Sure, Anya. Yes, tax expenditure is one of the thematic areas we are focusing on. How we go about is, from the scratch in terms of looking at the regulatory framework. Is there a law in place to start with, then go to the reporting framework, then the budgeting part. So we have an evolution in terms of the, many countries. In fact, we had regional workshop in Manila where we had a representative from Lao PDR expressing or echoing what you had mentioned. So we could see that many of the countries in this region does not even have a proper reporting framework or a budgeting framework. So that's an area where we are targeting, and we have devised certain tools in terms of how to go about in having this evolution.
Thank you. I think there is another one over there.
Yes, over here. Hello, everyone. Thanks again for this panel. I'm Catherine Jamvala with UNDP in New York, and I work on the Climate Promise. So my question is about carbon taxes and whether they have been considered in the region, in the countries, so the countries that are on the panel, and also question for my colleague at UNDP, whether this is an ask for countries, and if they haven't been considered, could you elaborate on why and what are the arguments for or against? Thank you.
Okay, let me quickly answer that. Yes, Catherine, we have energy transition as well as evaluating carbon taxes, both as part of SDG 13 as well as part of SDG 7. And all the focus countries as part of the Asia-Pacific region, this is a priority. And not only for the not only Asia-Pacific, across the 25 countries we're working on initiative, energy transition, both 7 and 13 are a priority area. And nobody has denied it. And in terms of enforcing, we have a environmental expert who kind of assess it, and it's been encouraging in terms of countries forthcoming, taking suggestions, and we're doing quite a lot of work on that.
Yeah, I think we have started this carbon credit tax in Sri Lanka, but we have not gone to that far, but because we have started already and we are working on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is very complex, if I may add, the carbon taxes, because, it will increase the cost of energy for low-income people. So it's one of these policies that require a very careful calibration and make sure that, the energy transition is just, not just energy transition. I think we have space for maybe one or two more. Please, go ahead. Mr. Homeir.
Yes, first of all, a very good presentation. I'd like to ask the gentleman, the tech specialist from the UNDP. You have, in one of your slides, you had identified a potential of about 3.6% growth on account of tax reforms. Now, my question is that in pure terms, the potential that you're talking about, or this comes after deducting the impact of the political economy? When I talk about political economy, I'm talking about taxing the untaxable, taxing the untaxed, which the untaxable sectors or the sections of society, they represent a lot of potential, but they can't be taxed. So this 3.6% is the pure things that's been worked out, or it has the element of political economy, the impact of political economy has been deducted from this, and then you are at 3.6%. Because this is a very good figure.
Yeah. It's just a disclaimer, it's not my workings, it was a study from the OECD. I'll share the workings as well.
Yeah,
it is a pure one, factoring agricultural as well, which is one of the main, especially these regions where it get exempted, not taxed. So it's a pure high-level figure, factoring the untaxed as well. In the sense, not taken the political economy. So therefore, yeah, maybe to that extent, certain benefit of doubt can be given on that. Yeah, the potential.
Okay, we have space for more questions. Okay, so thank you everybody. I think it was a great discussion. Thank you for our panelists and our presenter and our colleague from Mongolia. Apologies for the little technical glitches, but finally I think we managed to connect, and I appreciate very much your participation and your questions as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks to Alberto and to the panelists. We've had a couple of very good sessions, very good substantive discussions this morning. We've heard about more systemic approaches to budgeting, connecting the budget and the spending side of public finance to policy, and about tax audits, a range of tax reforms, how MTRS can help reduce the funding. I think we've also heard a lot of read across from the discussions today on public finance. Yesterday we've heard about taxonomies. In the public sector today, we talked a lot about taxonomies for private finance yesterday, and how can the two be connected. We talked as an enabler for private financing, and we heard about health expenditure and advancing health spending, health outcomes, the role of spending and the role of tax policy too. And this is really the essence of the INFF, aligning policies in each area of financing with sustainable development, but also looking at the integration across policy areas and how you can build a holistic approach that considers private finance, policy for the financial sector, policy on tax and budgets. So I think it's been a great discussion. We're going to have a coffee break now for 15 minutes, and we're going to come back and we're going to think about how this notion of SDG financing and INFFs applies in small island developing states. So please grab a coffee. If you could come back for 12 o'clock, we'll continue the discussion then. Thanks.